This is an ABC News Yahoo News live stream. The Democratic National Convention. Live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Here are Amy Walter and Rick Klein.
We're getting ready for the big vice presidential speech that's going to be happening in just a few minutes in this hour, in the 9 o'clock hour. A lot of anticipation around Barack Obama, not so much around Joe Biden. It's a little difficult to get people quite as excited over number 2 on the ticket at this point.
Except Joe Biden does one thing really, really, really well, and that is get a partisan crowd like this on their feet. I expect him to play the same role that we saw Paul Ryan play just a week ago in Tampa. He's the attack dog. He's the one who's going to go out there and make the case against Mitt Romney, and then he's followed by President Obama, who makes the case for himself. He's
an important bridge for President Obama to working class, that son of Scranton that we hear so much about. Always an important part of the campaign. By all accounts, very close to President Obama and the leadership. My point is, though, that this is not the man around whom the movement is built.
That's right. No. And remember, when he was brought in 2008, it really was not about the grassroots and that's what he was going to bring to the table. Instead, they brought him in to be that voice for the working class. There was the man from Scranton, the kid who grew up with the Catholic working class values, and of course he had the experience in the Senate and the foreign policy experience that the guy who's number 1 on the ticket didn't have. He was going to help him there.
That's right. We just got word the president's motorcade is on its way here to the big cable box. This is going to be the big moment. It isn't going to be quite the moment that they once envisioned. We had George Stephanopoulos on earlier in the week, and his point to us was that it was a mistake to even think about the outdoor venue because of the comparisons. Forget, even if you knew the weather was going to be absolutely gorgeous, there was going to be not a cloud in the sky, it was going to be a beautiful, perfect night, you were still going to invite the comparisons to 4 years ago, and that moment that just could not be replicated.
The Obama campaign, though, they feel very strongly that this is about organizing more than anything else. That's what that was about.
And now on the stage, Dr. Jill Biden, just introduced by one of her students.
That tonight's gonna be a good night. That tonight's gonna be.
Hello. What a night, what a crowd. Thank you, Angie. I'm so proud of how far you've come. I'm so proud to stand before you tonight, not only as the wife of our vice president, but as a full-time teacher and a military mom. I'm here for our son Bo and for all of our troops, veterans, and military families. 4 years ago, Bo stood on this stage to introduce his father, and soon afterward, he deployed to Iraq for a year with the Delaware Army National Guard. Tonight, thanks to the leadership of President Obama and my husband Joe, the war in Iraq is over. I'm also here tonight for my students like Angie, who work so hard to create a better life for themselves and their families. I've been a teacher for more than 30 years, and to this day, I continue to teach full-time at a community college in Northern Virginia. Not long after Joe was elected vice president, people started questioning whether I could keep teaching. Not Joe. He was there standing by my side saying, "Of course you should. It's who you are, Jill." For me, being a teacher isn't just what I do, it's who I am. These issues are personal to me, and for the more than 37 years that I've known Joe, I've seen firsthand just how personal they are to him too. Joe often tells people that I didn't agree to marry him until the 5th time he asked me. The truth is, I loved him from the start. I saw in him then the same character that I see in him today. I've seen Joe's character in his optimism. For families who have lost a loved one, kids struggling to find their way, workers out of a job, Joe always works to give people a sense of hope. I've also seen Joe's character in his determination. 2 decades ago, when Joe started working on the Violence Against Women Act, domestic violence was often treated as a private family matter rather than the crime it is. But Joe knew that he had to bring this issue out into the open. And in the years since that bill has passed, I've had women tell me that their sisters or their friends wouldn't be alive today if it weren't for Joe. Finally, I've seen Joe's character in his heart. When I first met him, Joe had already seen just how fragile life could be. When he was 29 years old, Joe lost his first wife and baby daughter in a tragic car accident while they were out getting their Christmas tree, and their boys were critically injured. Joe's life was shattered, but through his strong Catholic faith and his fierce love for our boys, Joe found the strength to get back up. That's Joe. That optimism, that determination, that big, strong heart that drives him forward every day. It's what he learned as a young boy growing up with 2 hardworking parents in Scranton, Pennsylvania. It's what makes him such a loving and supportive father of our 3 children, Bo, Hunter, and Ashley. And it's what drives him today as he and President Obama fight to strengthen the middle class they grew up in. For as long as I've known him, Joe has never given up, never failed to see the possibilities, and never had any doubt about who he's fighting for. And as long as he has the privilege of serving this nation, I know from the bottom of my heart that he will continue to fight for you every day. Thank you. God bless our troops and God bless our military families. Thank you.
Dr. Jill Biden talking ahead of her husband tonight, introducing the man from Scranton himself.
That's right. And
not a woman that I think a lot of, I was going to say, I mean, not a lot of people know a lot about her.
I was just going to say that, we don't get to see her. Now we're going to get to see a video, though, of the Joe Biden story.
What I like best about this country are the people. There isn't anything we can't do. There still is that feeling in America. That's the part I love about it. My mother thought the most important virtue was courage. She thought everything else flowed from that. And she said, bravery resides in every heart, and someday it's likely to be summoned.
Over the last 4 years, Americans have summoned the bravery that lives in our hearts. One by one, family by family, community by community, fighting through the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Proving once again, there is just no quit in America. Joe Biden understands this. It's what you learn growing up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware.
It was a neat place to grow up. I mean, we thought it was, and still do think it's completely normal. 4 kids, 3 bedrooms, mom and dad, and of the Probably 16 years I lived in that house. There was a relative, at least 14 of those years, living with us full time. My parents never doubted for a second I could be president or vice president, but there's this notion that nobody is better than you. You're no better than anyone else, but nobody's better than you, honey. And in this country, you can be anything you want to be.
And I think that sense of optimism is what he feels for America.
His parents taught him the fundamental truths that make this country special. Basic beliefs that have defined what it has meant to be middle class for generations.
Middle class wasn't a number. It wasn't your net worth. It was more a value set. It's the idea that everyone in this country who works at it can do well, who can own a home, not rent it, be able to live in a safe neighborhood, send their kid to school, help take care of their parents, maybe save enough that they can take care of themselves and not have to rely on their children. That's what this is all about.
But for too many middle-class families, this dream is falling out of reach. The pain of the Great Recession has cut deep.
The longest walk a parent can make is up a short flight of stairs, up to their child's bedroom, to sit on the edge of the bed and say, honey, I'm sorry, but you can't play in the Little League team this summer, or you can't sing in St. Anne's choir, or you can't, go to Roosevelt High School. I lost my job. We've got to move. My dad made that walk. Think how many people have made some version of that walk all across America. And they're not looking for a handout. They're just looking for a shot. Just a shot to get back in the game. And I think we owe them that shot.
Giving the middle class a shot has been the cause of this White House. From the moment they took the oath of office, the challenges have been enormous. For this president and vice president, it has been a partnership forged in fire.
It's turned out to be a singular opportunity to be able to work with a guy like Barack Obama because we trust each other. It's a completely candid relationship. I asked him why he wanted me, and he said to help him govern. And so it's been very rewarding, but it's been most rewarding watching him. This guy has an incredible amount of character. He's a backbone like a ramrod. He makes his judgments based upon what he thinks is good for the country. The last questions he asks are the political consequences of it.
Joe has been a great partner and a great vice president. He cares about the middle class. He knows what it's like to struggle, and he's carried that passion to the White House.
Every step of the way, they have met the challenge. Preventing an economic collapse, rescuing the auto industry, passing historic healthcare reform, eliminating bin Laden, ending the war in Iraq. And through it all, they have put the interests of the nation first.
Really and truly, Barack and I are about growing this economy from the middle out. Because when you do it that way, everybody does well. Poor folks have a ladder up. There's a way into the middle class, those who are striving to get in the middle class. And the wealthy do very well because the middle class have money in their pockets. They can go out and purchase things that make the economy grow. It not only is sort of the American way, it's also economically the best way to grow a country. Give them a tax system that's basically fair. Give their kids an opportunity for an education. Provide an environment where they can flourish.
Maybe it's because he's never forgotten where he came from, that he's never lost sight of where we need to go.
He has such a sense of justice and fairness to him, and I think that makes him fight even harder for people.
Maybe it's because he's known loss and pain in his own life that he's never been blind to the suffering of others.
I think that's one of the things that Joe has that a lot of people don't have, the sense of intuition. He intuitively feels someone's pain. He did know what it feels like to lose a wife and then the unspeakable, to lose a child. And I think that's why people connect with him.
He's always shown that he's been a man that supports the working class. He really cares for you.
He's absolutely here for us. He's listening.
Yes, he is, and I'm going to get a chocolate cone. Here, Roger.
Hey, Raj, this is Joe Biden.
Biden! Biden! Biden!
Maybe it's because he's never doubted the American people that he's never doubted America's future.
It's never been a safe bet to bet against America. I know I get criticized for saying that to foreign leaders, but I will not stop saying it. It's never been a good bet to bet against America.
We're in a fight for the middle class, and there's nobody I'd rather have in that fight with me than Joe Biden.
He's the husband of a teacher who knows teachers should be lifted up, not torn down. He's the son of an automan who never doubted the American auto industry would once again roar. He's the author of the Violence Against Women Act, who's had the courage to stand against the abuse of power his whole career. He's the father of an Iraq war veteran who believes our one sacred obligation is to take care of those who have served this nation.
I can say with absolute certitude, I am more optimistic about America's chances today than I have been my entire life.
Grit, determination, resilience, optimism. That's been the story of America, the story of ordinary people with extraordinary courage, overcoming extraordinary obstacles, and always moving towards a better day. Joe Biden knows that story. He's lived it. Our Vice President, Joe Biden.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Democrat. Jilly, I want you to know that Bo and Hunt and Ashley and I, we're so incredibly proud of you, kid. You know, we admire the way when every single solitary young person, and they're not all young, walk into your classroom. You not only teach them, you give them confidence. You give me confidence. And the passion she brings to trying to ease the burden on the families of our warriors. Jilly, they know you understand them, and that makes a gigantic difference. And folks, I tell you what, it was worth the trip to hear my wife say what I've never heard her say before. She's always loved me. If that's the case, why in the heck did it take 5 times of asking you? And that's true, 5 times. I don't know what it would have done, kiddo, had you on that 5th time said no. I love you. You're the love of my life and the life of my love. We've got 3 incredible kids. And Bo, I want to thank you for putting my name in nomination to be Vice President of the United States. I accept. With great honor and pleasure, I accept. Thank you. Thank you, my fellow Democrats. And I say to my fellow Americans, 4 years ago, a battered nation turned away from the failed policies of the past and turned to a leader who they knew would lift our nation out of the crisis. A journey we haven't finished yet. We know we still have more to do. But today, I say to my fellow citizens, in the face of the deepest economic crisis in our lifetime, this generation of Americans has proven itself as worthy as any generation before us. For we possess that same grit, that same determination, that same courage that has always defined what it means to be an American, has always defined all of you. Together, we're on a mission. We're on a mission to move this nation forward from doubt and downturn to promise and prosperity. A mission I guarantee you we will complete. A mission we will complete. Folks, tonight what I really want to do is tell you about my friend Barack Obama. No one could tell it as well or as eloquently as Michelle, as you did last night, Michelle, on Monday night. But I know him, to state the obvious, from a different perspective. I know him, and I want to show you. I want to show you the character of a leader who had what it took when the American people literally stood on the brink of a new depression. A leader who has what it takes to lead us over the next 4 years to a future as great as our people. I want to take you inside the White House to see the president as I see him every day, because I don't see him in sound bites. I walk 30 paces down the hall into the Oval Office, and I see him, I watch him in action. 4 years ago, the middle class was already losing ground, and then the bottom fell out. The financial crisis hit like a sledgehammer on all the people I grew up with. You remember the headlines. You saw some of them in the previews. Highlight: highest job losses in 60 years. Headlines: economy on the brink. Markets plummet worldwide. From the very moment President Obama sat behind the desk resolute in the Oval Office, he knew he had not only to restore the confidence of a nation, but he had to restore the confidence of the whole world. And he also knew that one false move could bring a run on the banks or a credit collapse to put another several million people out of work. America and the world needed a strong president with a steady hand and with the judgment and vision to see us through. Day after day, night after night, I sat beside him as he made one gutsy decision after the other to stop the slide and reverse it. I watched him. I watched him stand up. I watched him stand up to intense pressure and stare down enormous challenges, the consequences of which were awesome. But most of all, I got to see firsthand what drove this man. His profound concern for the average American. He knew that no matter how tough the decisions he had to make were in that Oval Office, he knew that families all over America, sitting at their kitchen tables, were literally making decisions for their family that were equally as consequential. You know, Barack and I, we've been through a lot together in these 4 years, and we learned about one another a lot about one another. And one of the things I learned about Barack is the enormity of his heart, and I think he learned about me the depth of my loyalty to him. And there's another thing that has bound us together these past 4 years. We had a pretty good idea what all those families, all you Americans in trouble, were going through. In part because our own families had gone through similar struggles. Barack, as a young man, had to sit at the end of his mother's hospital bed and watch her fight with her insurance company at the very same time she was fighting for her life. When I was a young kid in 3rd grade, I remember my dad coming up the stairs in my grandpa's house where we were living, sitting at the end of my bed and saying, "Joey, I'm going to have to leave for a while. Go down to Wilmington, Delaware with Uncle Frank. They're good jobs down there, honey. And in a little while I'll be able to send for you and Mom and Jimmy and Val, and everything's going to be fine." For the rest of our lives, my sister and my brothers, for the rest of our life, my dad never failed to remind us that a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about your place in the community. It's about being able to look your child in the eye and say, "Honey, it's going to be okay," and mean it and know it's true. When Barack and I were growing up, there was an implicit understanding in America that if you took responsibility, you'd get a fair shot at a better life. And the values behind that bargain were the values that shaped both of us and many, many of you. And today, those same values are Barack's guiding star. Folks, I've watched him. He has never wavered. He never backs down. He always steps up, and he always asks in every one of those critical meetings the same fundamental question: how is this going to affect the average American? How is this going to affect people's lives? That's what's inside this man. That's what makes him tick. That's who he is. And folks, because of the decisions he has made and the incredible strength of the American people, America has turned the corner. The worst job loss since the Great Depression. We've since created 4.5 million private sector jobs in the past 29 months. Look, folks, President Obama and Governor Romney, they're both loving husbands. They're both devoted fathers. But let's be straight. They bring a vastly different vision and a vastly different value set to the job. And tonight, although you've heard people talk about it, I want to talk about two things from a slightly different perspective, from my perspective. I'd like to focus on two crises and show you the character of the leadership that each man will bring to this job. Because as I said, I've had a ringside seat. The first of these, a lot's been talked about, and God loved Jennifer Granholm. Wasn't she great? Wasn't she great? I love Jennifer. But the first story I want to talk to you about is the rescue of the automobile industry. And let me tell you from this man's ringside seat, let me tell you about how Barack Obama saved more than 1 million American jobs. In the first days, literally the first days that we took office, General Motors and Chrysler were literally on the verge of liquidation. If the president didn't act, if he didn't act immediately, there wouldn't be any industry left to save. So we sat hour after hour in the Oval Office. Michelle remembers what he must have thought when he came back upstairs. We sat hour after hour. We listened to senators, congressmen, outside advisors, even some of our own advisors. And we listened to them to say some of the following things. They said, well, we shouldn't step up. The risks were too high. The outcome was too uncertain. And the president, he patiently sat there and he listened. But he didn't see it the way they did. He understood something they didn't get, and one of the reasons I love him. He understood that this wasn't just about cars. It was about the people who built and made those cars, and about the America those people built. In those meetings, I often thought about my dad. My dad was an automobile man. He would have been one of those guys all the way down the line, not in the factory floor, not along the supply chain, but one of those guys who were selling American cars to American people. I thought about what this crisis would have meant for the mechanics and the secretaries and the salespeople who my dad managed for over 35 years. And I know for certain that my dad, were he here today, he'd be fighting like heck for the president, because the president fought to save the jobs of those people my dad cared so much about. Ladies and gentlemen, my dad respected Barack Obama, would have respected Barack Obama had he been around, for having had the guts to stand up for the automobile industry when so many others just were prepared to walk away. You know, when I look back on the president's decision, I think of another son of another automobile man, Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney grew up in Detroit. My dad managed, his dad ran an entire automobile company, American Motors. Yes, what I don't understand is, in spite of that, he was willing to let Detroit go bankrupt. Look, I don't think he's a bad guy. No, I don't think he's a bad guy. I'm sure he grew up loving cars as much as I did. But what I don't understand, what I don't think he understood, that saving the automobile worker, saving the industry, what it meant to all of America, not just auto workers. I think he saw it the Bain way. Now, I mean this sincerely. I think he saw it in terms of balance sheets and write-offs. Folks, the Bain way may bring your firm the highest profits, but it's not the way to lead our country from the highest office. When things hung in the balance, I mean literally hung in the balance, the president understood this was about a lot more than the automobile industry. This was about restoring America's pride. He understood in his gut what it would mean to leave 1 million people without hope or work if he didn't act. And he intuitively understood the message it would have sent around the world if the United States gave up on an industry that helped put America on the map in the first place. Conviction, resolve, Barack Obama, That's what saved the automobile industry. Conviction, resolve, Barack Obama. Look, you heard my friend John Kerry. This president has shown the same resolve, the same steady hand in his role as commander-in-chief. Look, which brings me to the next illustration I want to tell you about, the next crisis he had to face. In 2008, before he was president, Barack Obama made a promise to the American people. He said, if we have bin Laden in our sights, we will take him out. He went on to say, that has to be our biggest national security priority. Look, Barack understood that the search for bin Laden was about a lot more than taking a monstrous leader off the battlefield. It was about so much more than that. It was about righting an unspeakable wrong. It was about healing an unbearable wound, a nearly unbearable wound in America's heart. And he also knew the message we had to send around the world. If you attack innocent Americans, we will follow you to the end of the earth. Look, most of all, President Obama had an unyielding faith in the capacity and the capability of our special forces. Literally the finest warriors in the history of the world. The finest warriors in the history of the world. So we sat. We sat originally, only 5 of us. We sat in the Situation Room beginning in the fall of the year before. We listened, we talked, we heard, and he listened to the risks and reservations about the raid. He asked again the tough questions. He listened to the doubts that were expressed. But when Admiral McCraven looked him in the eye and said, "Sir, we can get this job done," I sit next to him. I looked at your husband, and I knew at that moment he had made his decision. And his response was decisive. He said, "Do it," and justice was done. Folks, Governor Romney didn't see things that way. When he was asked about bin Laden in 2007, here's what he said. He said, "It's not worth moving heaven and earth and spending billions of dollars just to catch one person." But he was wrong. He was wrong. Because if you understood that America's heart had to be healed, you would have done exactly what the president did, and you would move heaven and earth to hunt him down and to bring him to justice. Look, 4 years ago, 4 years ago, only thing missing at this convention this year is my mom. 4 years ago, my mom was still with us, sitting up in the stadium in Denver. I quoted her, one of her favorite expressions. She used to say to all her children, she said, "Joey, Bravery resides in every heart, and the time will come when it must be summoned. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you what I think you already know, but I watch it up close. Bravery resides in the heart of Barack Obama, and time again, I witnessed him summon it. This man has courage in his soul, compassion in his heart, and a spine of steel. And because of all the actions he took, because of the calls he made, because of the determination of American workers and the unparalleled bravery of our special forces, we can now proudly say what you've heard me say the last 6 months. Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. That's right. One man. Folks, we know we have more work to do. We know we're not there yet. But not a day has gone by in the last 4 years when I haven't been grateful as an American that Barack Obama is our president, because he always has the courage to make the tough decision. Speaking of tough decisions, speaking of tough calls, last week we heard at the Republican convention, we heard our opponents. We heard them pledge that they too had the courage to make the tough calls. That's what they said. But folks, in case you didn't notice, I say to my fellow Americans, in case you didn't notice, they didn't have the courage to tell you what calls they'd make. They never mentioned any of that. Mrs. Robinson, you watched from home, I guess, from the White House. You heard them talk so much about how they cared so much about Medicare, how much they wanted to preserve it. That's what they told you. But let's look at what they didn't tell you. What they didn't tell you is that the plan they have already put down on paper would immediately cut benefits from more than 30 million seniors already on Medicare. What they didn't tell you is the plan they're proposing would cause Medicare to go bankrupt by 2016. And what they really didn't tell you is if you want to know, they're not for preserving Medicare at all. They're for a new plan. It's called voucher care. Look, folks, that's not courage. That's not even truthful. That's not even truthful. In Tampa, they talk with great urgency about the nation's debt and the need to act now. But not once, not one single time did they tell you that they rejected every plan put forward by us, by the bipartisan Simpson-Bowles Commission they referenced, or by any other respected group to reduce the national debt. They were not for any of them. Why? Because they're not prepared to do anything about the debt if it contained even $1, I'm not exaggerating, even $1 or 1 cent in new taxes for millionaires. Folks, that's not courage and that's not fair. Look. In a sense, this can be reduced to a single notion. The two men seeking to lead this country over the next 4 years, as I said at the outset, have fundamentally different visions and completely different value set. Governor Romney believes in this global economy, it doesn't matter much where American companies invest and put their money or where they create jobs. As a matter of fact, in his budget proposal, in his tax proposal, he calls for a new tax. It's called a territorial tax. which the experts have looked at, and they acknowledge it will create 800,000 new jobs, all of them overseas, all of them. And what I found fascinating, the most fascinating thing I found last week was when Governor Romney said that as president, he would take a jobs tour. Well, with his support for outsourcing, it's going to have to be a foreign trip. It will. Look, President Obama knows that creating jobs in America, keeping jobs in America, bringing jobs back to America is what the president's job was all about. That's what presidents do, or at least supposed to do. Folks, Governor Romney believes it's okay to raise taxes on middle classes by $2,000 in order to pay for literally another $1 trillion tax cut for the very wealthy. President Obama knows that there's nothing decent or fair about asking people with more to do less and with less to do more. Governor Romney believes that kids like our dreamers, those immigrant children who were brought to America's shores through no fault of their own, he thinks they're a drag on the American economy. President Obama believes that even though those dreamers, those kids, didn't choose to come here, they have chosen to do right by America, and it's time for us to do right by them. Governor Romney. Governor Romney looks at the notion of equal pay in terms of a company's bottom line. President Obama, he knows that making sure our daughters get the same pay for the same jobs as our son is every father's bottom line. Look, I kind of expected all that from them, but one thing truly perplexed me at their convention. The thing that perplexed me most was this idea they kept talking about the culture of dependency. They seem to think you create a culture of dependency when you provide a bright, young, qualified kid from a working class family a loan to get to college, or when you provide a job training program in a new industry for a dad who lost his job because it was outsourced. Folks, that's not how we look at it. That's not how America's ever looked at it. What he doesn't understand is all these men and women are looking for is a chance, just a chance to acquire the skills to be able to provide for their families so they can once again hold their heads high and lead independent lives with dignity. That's all they're looking for. Look, and it literally amazes me they don't understand that. You know, I told you at the outset, the choice is stark. Two different visions, two different value sets. But at its core, the difference is able to reduce to be a fundamental difference. You see, we, most Americans, have incredible faith in the decency and hard work of the American people. And we know what has made this country. It's the American people. As I mentioned at the outset, 4 years ago, we were hit hard. You saw your retirement accounts drained, the equity in your homes vanished, jobs lost around the line. But what did you do as Americans? What you've always done. You didn't lose faith. You fought back. You didn't give up. You got up. You're the ones. The American people, you're the ones. You're the reason why we are still better positioned than any country in the world to lead the 21st century. You never quit on America, and you deserve a president who will never quit on you. There's one more thing. One more thing our Republican opponents are just dead wrong about. America is not in decline. America is not in decline. I've got news for Governor Romney and Congressman Ryan. Gentlemen, never, ever, it never makes sense. It's never been a good bet to bet against the American people. Never. My fellow Americans, America is coming back, and we're not going back. And we have no intention of downsizing the American dream. Never a good bet. Ladies and gentlemen, in a moment, we're going to hear from a man whose whole life is a testament to the power of that dream, and whose presidency is the best hope to secure that dream for our children. For you see, we see a future. We really, honest to God, do. We see a future where everyone, rich and poor, does their part and has a part. A future where we depend more on clean energy from home and less on oil from abroad. A future where we're #1 in the world again in college graduation. A future where we promote the private sector, not the privileged sector. And a future where women once again control their own choices, their destiny, and their own health care. And ladies and gentlemen, Barack and I see a future. It's in our DNA where no one is forced to live in the shadows of intolerance. Folks, we see a future where America leads not only by the power of the example of our power, but by the power of our example, where we bring our troops home from Afghanistan just as we proudly did from Iraq. A future where we fulfill the only truly sacred obligation we have as a nation. The only truly sacred obligation we have is to prepare those who we send to war and care for them when they come home from war. And tonight, I want to acknowledge, as we should every night, the incredible debt we owe to the families of those 6,473 fallen angels, and those 49,746 wounded, thousands critically, thousands who will need our help for the rest of their lives. Folks, we must never, ever forget their sacrifice and always keep them in our care and in our prayers. My fellow Americans, we now find ourselves at the hinge of history. And the direction we turn is not figuratively, is literally in your hands. It has been a truly great honor to serve you and to serve with Barack, who has always stood up with you for the past 4 years. I've seen him tested. I know his strength, his command, his faith. And I also know the incredible confidence he has in all of you. I know this man. Yes, The work of recovery is not yet complete, but we are on our way. The journey of hope is not yet finished, but we are on our way. And the cause of change is not fully accomplished, but we are on our way. So I say to you tonight, with absolute confidence, America's best days are ahead, and yes, we are on our way. And in light of that horizon, for the values that define us, for the ideals that inspire us, there is only one choice. That choice is to move forward, boldly forward, and finish the job and re-elect President Barack Obama. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. God bless you. Thank you.
Here's Vice President Joe Biden getting his chance to make the case for a second term, also making the case against their rivals, Mitt Romney. This was an impassioned Joe Biden. This was also an off-the-cuff Joe Biden, being oh-so Joe Biden with many literalies and folks, and he really trying to, once again, make the case why his boss deserves a second term.
That's right, Joe Biden with that middle-class appeal. We want to bring in Nightline's Terry Moran will be anchoring the coverage later tonight. And Terry, as only Joe Biden can do, you had the case there with this middle-class appeal, describing his boss, describing the van, describing the vision. What did you make of it?
You know, I enjoyed that. I did. But the vice presidency does not get a lot of respect, and Joe Biden in many ways is no different from that. There are many precincts of the American electorate where he is a figure of fun, a figure of mockery, or even a figure of contempt. But they love him here. He is everybody's favorite uncle, partly because he has that beating Democratic heart that you talk about. He has those values. He articulates them in a very tub-thumping, sententious, senatorial way. Joe Biden's idea of eloquence is to add 10 words or so to every sentence that the speechwriters wrote. It's inimitable.
It is indeed. It must drive the speechwriters crazy. We're getting signs falling on us here. We should show them here a little bit. There are two signs going up: fired up and ready for Joe. I didn't get it until I said it out loud, but then it sort of made sense.
Right.
But yes, no. There's great respect, great love, and admiration for Joe Biden in this room. This is not Joe Biden's convention. This is not Joe Biden's movement, Joe Biden's Democratic Party, but he is an important link to a tradition in the party, tradition of speech-making, a tradition of political connections, urban, ethnic Democrats, white working-class Democrats, by the way, same kind of Democrats that Barack Obama has always had trouble with.
Absolutely, Rick. That's very well put. And they count on him to make the connection with those voters that Barack Obama has trouble with.
Well, I just want to point out that we have Senator Dick Durbin right now up on stage. He, of course, served with the then Senator Barack Obama.
He was a senior senator in Illinois. The two of them obviously worked together to the extent that he worked in the Senate at all. Barack Obama was working at Dick Durbin's side.
Terry, I just want to bring up one thing. I'm curious how you saw this. And Joe Biden, of course, making a testament to the character of Barack Obama and his steel spine and all the tough decisions that he made. But I was struck by the last couple of sentences where he tried to make the case for why these two should be reelected. He said, the work of recovery is not yet complete. We're on our way. The journey of hope is not yet finished. We're on our way. Right? So basically saying, you know what? The first 4 years, we didn't get it done. Is that the kind of thing that voters say, oh, great, can't wait to go, are they looking for a sequel?
Right.
For something that's not completed?
That's a great point, because this is a pep rally, as you can hear. So they like to be lifted up a lot. But voters out there want a plan of action, and they want leadership to carry us through. He said, we're on our way, we'll keep going. To do
where?
What?
Right.
To where? And that still hasn't been answered. And from what we understand, Barack Obama is going to try to answer that with some goals setting. Here's where we'll go. We'll see if it works.
It was always been the missing piece of Barack Obama, is that exactly what you have the hope to change toward what, to change into what. What is the goal? What is the end point? We talked to a lot of guests tonight who talked about how voters felt like voting for hope and change was enough. that you get that done, you've made the action, that's it. That's not how it works. And I think the challenge that he never really instilled in his own followers was, what do you do next? What is the next act? And that I think is the challenge that overhangs this entire election for President Obama.
And it may be that the hope was that the change would come through Barack Obama's exceptional ability, as he himself thought, of crossing all the borders and boundaries in our polity, because Americans aren't ideologues. We all know that deep down. There are some ideologues on opposite sides. We're pragmatists. We like what works. Make it work. Make it work for our kids. Make it work for the future. And I think there was a sense that the problem is the process. If we could fix the poisonous rhetoric and the ridiculous system, we'd get those pragmatic solutions. He hasn't been able to come anywhere near that.
Nightline anchor Terry Moran, we'll be back with the coverage at 11:35 p.m. Eastern tonight, wrapping everything from the Democratic National Convention. Thanks for hanging with us.
Thanks, guys.
All week. Really appreciate it. Yeah,
we have the best view, and we are the most fun, right?
No question.
Of anybody.
And our live stream is going to go through all the speeches tonight. Of course, the president is on deck. We're going to have an introductory video in a couple of minutes. We're here at abcnews.com, at yahoonews.com, also on the YouTube Politics channel, streaming on your mobile devices, hashtagging it at DNC 2012. Dick Durbin behind us. He's going to introduce this video that is going to reintroduce the introduction of the introducer. Did we all get that figuratively? Because I think
I'm very, very confused.
It does get you in circles after a little while. But yes, this is of course a convention to reintroduce President Obama, a nation that knows him, a party that knows him, but cast it in a different light.
They do, and again, I think this is going to be the big challenge here for the president, to say to people not simply where exactly are we going, make those specifics as you said, but to try to convince Americans who don't feel like he's done a great job currently, right? I mean, what you're asking voters to believe is, even though you don't think I've done a particularly good job now, I'm going to do a better job in the next 4 years. Mostly voters reward success. And you know from all of our polling that the frustration level with the current economy and his handling of it, that's still going to weigh him down long after the speech.
It is. And, of course, you get to program your own convention. You get to say whatever you want. You get to tell your supporters whatever you want. You get to put the speakers out that you want. That's not how elections break down, because it is a lot more complicated when you leave this room. But you have to think about these couple of days as a pretty successful series of speeches, series of events for the Democrats.
Yeah, and I think we had one of our guests, Alfred Woodard, make this case, and it's a very good one, which is what these help to do, these conventions, is to fire up those very people who need to go and talk to their neighbors and their friends and the people that they can help to inspire. You're supposed to bring this energy home and not let it fade once we hit September and October. I'll also note, and I thought this was quite interesting, that we are officially, exactly, literally 2 months away from Election Day, November 6th.
Game on. All right, let's take a little of Dick Durbin, who's going to introduce a video that's going to bring us the President of the United States.
We've been through a lot together. But we've known tough times before. What carries us through and helps us endure? What are the qualities so essential to us and the leaders who have occupied this office?
He did some things knowing that they wouldn't be popular in the short run that would lay the foundation for recovery. No other country in the world would give up the capacity to manufacture cars if it had it. And so he did what the government's supposed to do in a case like that.
Do not rescue the automobile industry. I mean, it was overwhelming. Look at the polling number.
a country in the midst of a financial crisis that no one really, knew the depths of the challenges that were coming. I think he had a sense.
My grandparents came out of the Depression. They knew what it was like for people not to have work. We all understand work as something more than just a paycheck. What gives you dignity? It gives you a sense of purpose.
He said, you guys got to work together and come up, and everybody's got to have some skin in the game here. You got to have a give up. You got to modernize the automobile industry.
Everybody said, it's never going to work. Well, guess what?
80,000 more people working in the car business than we did before the restructuring was passed.
They're middle-class jobs. People can raise a family on a decent wage.
We've gone from an economy that was shedding jobs to one that's consistently creating jobs at all sectors. Every night, he's up until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning with his big stack of briefing books, and he reads the letters he gets from people all over America. They are, as he put it, some of the most informative pieces of material that he gets that keeps him grounded. And anyone who has kids know that the truth is, no matter what you do, your kids still think that they are the most important people in the room. So we sit around the dinner table, and he's the last person to be asked, oh yeah, how was your day, Dad? Really, he's an afterthought.
He never starts a conversation by saying, what's the best political decision here? What'll help us the most? Never.
So he wasn't going to back out just because it got hard, just because it didn't poll well. That's just never been who he is, and it's certainly not how he will ever govern this country.
When my mom got cancer, she wasn't a wealthy woman, and it pretty much drained all her resources.
Watching your mother die of something that could have been prevented, that's a tough thing to deal with.
The reason he pushed ahead, knowing that there could be horrible political consequences for him, just as there were for me, is that healthcare costs have gone up 3 times the rate of inflation. This is a huge economic issue because we spend 17.5% of our income on healthcare.
Anybody who gets medical care, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Imagine working class mom opening up that kind of bill, with somebody sending that to her with a straight face. That understanding of that kind of reality for millions of Americans drove him to make sure that this legislation got passed. It takes a conscious effort to stay connected with what's going on in people's lives.
This was a matter of principle for him. He ran on it, he said he was going to do it, and he did it.
You hire the president to make the calls when no one else can do it. He had to decide. That's one thing George Bush said that was right. The president is the decider-in-chief.
We were only about 50% sure that bin Laden was in that compound. But I had 100% confidence in our Navy SEALs.
I sat in that room with him when we were getting feeds on what was going on at the time. He sat there resolute, concerned, just watching. You got him. Confirm it. Just boom, boom, boom. Then came and explained to everybody the next day in the cabinet room what happened. This is a guy who, as I said, a backbone like a ramrod.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world.
He took the harder and the more honorable path, and the one that produced, in my opinion, the best result. When I saw what had happened, I thought to myself, I hope that's the call I would have made. It was just the right thing to do.
We have a long way to go. But with every new beginning, every homecoming, every step forward, we remember who we are.
What's really allowing this economy to heal and get us moving again is the resilience and the strength and the character of the American people. They don't quit. They don't give up. Partly because of family, partly because of a sense of community, patriotism, and pride in this country, they keep going. That's the incredible gift that the American people keep giving back to me in this job.
Thank you so much. Tonight, I am so thrilled and so honored and so proud to introduce the love of my life, the father of our two girls, and the President of the United States of America, Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Michelle, I love you so much. A few nights ago, everybody was reminded just what a lucky man I am. Malia and Sasha, we are so proud of you. And yes, you do have to go to school in the morning. And Joe Biden, thank you for being the very best vice president I could have ever hoped for, and being a strong and loyal friend. Madam Chairwoman, delegates, I accept your nomination for President of the United States. Now, the first time I addressed this convention in 2004, I was a younger man. A Senate candidate from Illinois who spoke about hope. Not blind optimism, not wishful thinking, but hope in the face of difficulty. Hope in the face of uncertainty. That dogged faith in the future which has pushed this nation forward even when the odds are great, even when the road is long. 8 years later, that hope has been tested by the cost of war, by one of the worst economic crises in history, and by political gridlock that's left us wondering whether it's still even possible to tackle the challenges of our time. I know campaigns can seem small, even silly sometimes. Trivial things become big distractions. Serious issues become sound bites. The truth gets buried under an avalanche of money and advertising. I mean, if you're sick of hearing me approve this message, believe me, so am I. But when all is said and done, when you pick up that ballot to vote, you will face the clearest choice of any time in a generation. Over the next few years, big decisions will be made in Washington on jobs, the economy, taxes and deficits, energy, education, war and peace. Decisions that will have a huge impact on our lives and on our children's lives for decades to come. And on every issue, the choice you face won't just be between two candidates or two parties. It will be a choice between two different paths for America. A choice between two fundamentally different visions for the future. Ours is a fight to restore the values that built the largest middle class and the strongest economy the world has ever known. The values my grandfather defended as a soldier in Patton's army. The values that drove my grandmother to work on a bomber assembly line while he was gone. They knew they were part of something larger. A nation that triumphed over fascism and depression. A nation where the most innovative businesses turned out the world's best products, and everyone shared in that pride and success, from the corner office to the factory floor. My grandparents were given the chance to go to college, buy their own home, and fulfill the basic bargain at the heart of America's story. The promise that hard work will pay off, that responsibility will be rewarded, that everyone gets a fair shot, and everyone does their fair share, and everyone plays by the same rules, from Main Street to Wall Street to Washington, D.C. And I ran for president because I saw that basic bargain slipping away. I began my career helping people in the shadow of a shuttered steel mill at a time when too many good jobs were starting to move overseas. And by 2008, we had seen nearly a decade in which families struggled with costs that kept rising, but paychecks that didn't. Folks racking up more and more debt just to make the mortgage or pay tuition, put gas in the car or food on the table. And when the house of cards collapsed in the Great Recession, millions of innocent Americans lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings, a tragedy from which we're still fighting to recover. Now, our friends down in Tampa at the Republican convention were more than happy to talk about everything they think is wrong with America. But they didn't have much to say about how they'd make it right. They want your vote, but they don't want you to know their plan. And that's because all they have to offer is the same prescriptions they've had for the last 30 years. Have a surplus? Try a tax cut. Deficit too high? Try another. Feel a cold coming on? Take 2 tax cuts, roll back some regulations, and call us in the morning. Now, I've cut taxes for those who need it. Middle-class families, small businesses. But I don't believe that another round of tax breaks for millionaires will bring good jobs to our shores or pay down our deficit. I don't believe that firing teachers or kicking students off financial aid will grow the economy or help us compete with the scientists and engineers coming out of China. After all we've been through, I don't believe that rolling back regulations on Wall Street will help the small businesswoman expand or the laid-off construction worker keep his home. We have been there, we've tried that, and we're not going back. We are moving forward, America. Now, I won't pretend the path I'm offering is quick or easy. I never have. You didn't elect me to tell you what you wanted to hear. You elected me to tell you the truth. And the truth is, it will take more than a few years for us to solve challenges that have built up over decades. It'll require common effort and shared responsibility, and the kind of bold, persistent experimentation that Franklin Roosevelt pursued during the only crisis worse than this one. And by the way, those of us who carry on his party's legacy should remember that not every problem can be remedied with another government program or dictate from Washington. But know this, America, our problems can be solved. Our challenges can be met. The path we offer may be harder, but it leads to a better place, and I'm asking you to choose that future. I'm asking you to rally around a set of goals for your country. Goals in manufacturing, energy, education, national security, and the deficit. Real, achievable plans that will lead to new jobs, more opportunity, and rebuild this economy on a stronger foundation. That's what we can do in the next 4 years, and that is why I am running for a second term as President of the United States. Where we export more products and outsource fewer jobs. After a decade that was defined by what we bought and borrowed, we're getting back to basics and doing what America's always done best. We are making things again. I've met workers in Detroit and Toledo who feared they'd never build another American car. And today they can't build them fast enough because we reinvented a dying auto industry that's back on the top of the world. I've worked with business leaders who are bringing jobs back to America, not because our workers make less pay, but because we make better products, because we work harder and smarter than anyone else. I've signed trade agreements that are helping our companies sell more goods to millions of new customers, goods that are stamped with 3 proud words, made in America. Decline. This country created over 500,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 2.5 years. And now you have a choice. We can give more tax breaks to corporations that ship jobs overseas, or we can start rewarding companies that open new plants and train new workers and create new jobs here in the United States of America. We can help big factories and small businesses double their exports. And if we choose this path, we can create 1 million new manufacturing jobs in the next 4 years. You can make that happen. You can choose that future. You can choose the path where we control more of our own energy. After 30 years of inaction, we raised fuel standards so that by the middle of the next decade, cars and trucks will go twice as far on a gallon of gas. We have doubled our use of renewable energy, and thousands of Americans have jobs today building wind turbines and long-lasting batteries. In the last year alone, we cut oil imports by 1 million barrels a day, more than any administration in recent history. And today, the United States of America is less dependent on foreign oil than at any time in the last 2 decades. So now you have a choice between a strategy that reverses this progress or one that builds on it. We've opened millions of new acres for oil and gas exploration in the last 3 years, and we'll open more. But unlike my opponent, I will not let oil companies write this country's energy plan or endanger our coastlines or collect another $4 billion in corporate welfare from our taxpayers. We're offering a better path. We're offering a better path where a future where we keep investing in wind and solar and clean coal, where farmers and scientists harness new biofuels to power our cars and trucks, where construction workers build homes and factories that waste less energy, where we develop a 100-year supply of natural gas that's right beneath our feet. If you choose this path, we can cut our oil imports in half by 2020 and support more than 600,000 new jobs in natural gas alone. And yes, my plan will continue to reduce the carbon pollution that is heating our planet, because climate change is not a hoax. More droughts and floods and wildfires are not a joke. They are a threat to our children's future, and in this election, you can do something about it. You can choose a future where more Americans have the chance to gain the skills they need to compete, no matter how old they are or how much money they have. Education was the gateway to opportunity for me. It was the gateway for Michelle. It was the gateway for most of you. And now, more than ever, it is the gateway to a middle-class life. For the first time in a generation, nearly every state has answered our call to raise their standards for teaching and learning. Some of the worst schools in the country have made real gains in math and reading. Millions of students are paying less for college today because we finally took on a system that wasted billions of taxpayer dollars on banks and lenders. And now you have a choice. We can gut education, or we can decide that in the United States of America, no child should have her dreams deferred because of a crowded classroom or a crumbling school. No family should have to set aside a college acceptance letter because they don't have the money. No company should have to look for workers overseas because they couldn't find any with the right skills here at home. That's not our future. That is not our future. The government has a role in this, but teachers must inspire, principals must lead, parents must instill a thirst for learning, and students, you got to do the work. And together, I promise you, we can out-educate and out-compete any nation on earth. So help me recruit 100,000 math and science teachers within 10 years and improve early childhood education. Help give 2 million workers the chance to learn skills at their community college that will lead directly to a job. Help us work with colleges and universities to cut in half the growth of tuition costs over the next 10 years. We can meet that goal together. You can choose that future for America.
That's our future. You know, in a world of new threats and new challenges, you can choose leadership that has been tested and proven. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq. We did. I promised to refocus on the terrorists who actually attacked us on 9/11, and we have. We've blunted the Taliban's momentum in Afghanistan, and in 2014, our longest war will be over. A new tower rises above the New York skyline. Al-Qaeda is on the path to defeat, and Osama bin Laden is dead. Tonight, we pay tribute to the Americans who still serve in harm's way. We are forever in debt to a generation whose sacrifice has made this country safer and more respected. We will never forget you. And so long as I'm Commander-in-Chief, we will sustain the strongest military the world has ever known. When you take off the uniform, we will serve you as well as you've served us, because no one who fights for this country should have to fight for a job or a roof over their heads or the care that they need when they come home. Around the world, we've strengthened old alliances and forged new coalitions to stop the spread of nuclear weapons. We've reasserted our power across the Pacific and stood up to China on behalf of our workers. From Burma to Libya to South Sudan, we have advanced the rights and dignity of all human beings, men and women, Christians and Muslims and Jews. But for all the progress that we've made, challenges remain. Terrorist plots must be disrupted. Europe's crisis must be contained. Our commitment to Israel's security must not waver, and neither must our pursuit of peace. The Iranian government must face a world that stays united against its nuclear ambitions. The historic change sweeping across the Arab world must be defined not by the iron fist of a dictator or the hate of extremists, but by the hopes and aspirations of ordinary people who are reaching for the same rights that we celebrate here today. So now we have a choice. My opponent and his running mate are new to foreign policy. But from all that we've seen and heard, they want to take us back to an era of blustering and blundering that cost America so dearly. After all, you don't call Russia our #1 enemy, not Al-Qaeda, Russia, unless you're still stuck in a Cold War mind warp. You might not be ready for diplomacy with Beijing if you can't visit the Olympics without insulting our closest ally. My opponent said that it was tragic to end the war in Iraq, and he won't tell us how he'll end the war in Afghanistan. Well, I have, and I will. And while my opponent would spend more money on military hardware that our Joint Chiefs don't even want, I will use the money we're no longer spending on war to pay down our debt and put more people back to work, rebuilding roads and bridges and schools and runways, because after 2 wars that have cost us thousands of lives and over $1 trillion, it's time to do some nation building right here at home. You can choose a future where we reduce our deficit without sticking it to the middle class. Independent experts say that my plan would cut our deficit by $4 trillion. And last summer, I worked with Republicans in Congress to cut $1 billion in spending, because those of us who believe government can be a force for good should work harder than anyone to reform it so that it's leaner and more efficient and more responsive to the American people. I want to reform the tax code so that it's simple, fair, and ask the wealthiest households to pay higher taxes on incomes over $250,000. The same rate we had when Bill Clinton was president, the same rate we had when our economy created nearly 23 million new jobs, the biggest surplus in history, and a whole lot of millionaires to boot. Now, I'm still eager to reach an agreement based on the principles of my bipartisan debt commission. No party has a monopoly on wisdom. No democracy works without compromise. I want to get this done, and we can get it done. But when Governor Romney and his friends in Congress tell us we can somehow lower our deficits by spending trillions more on new tax breaks for the wealthy, well, what Bill Clinton call it? You do the arithmetic. You do the math. I refuse to go along with that. And as long as I'm president, I never will. I refuse to ask middle-class families to give up their deductions for owning a home or raising their kids just to pay for another millionaire's tax cut. I refuse to ask students to pay more for college or kick children out of Head Start programs to eliminate health insurance for millions of Americans who are poor and elderly or disabled. Also, those with the most can pay less. I'm not going along with that. And I will never turn Medicare into a voucher. No American should ever have to spend their golden years at the mercy of insurance companies. They should retire with the care and the dignity that they have earned. Yes, we will reform and strengthen Medicare for the long haul, but we'll do it by reducing the cost of health care, not by asking seniors to pay thousands of dollars more. And we will keep the promise of Social Security by taking the responsible steps to strengthen it, not by turning it over to Wall Street. This is the choice we now face. This is what the election comes down to. Over and over, we've been told by our opponents that bigger tax cuts and fewer regulations are the only way. That since government can't do everything, it should do almost nothing. If you can't afford health insurance, hope that you don't get sick. If a company releases toxic pollution into the air your children breathe, well, that's the price of progress. If you can't afford to start a business or go to college, take my opponent's advice and borrow money from your parents. You know what? That's not who we are. That's not what this country's about. As Americans, we believe we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, rights that no man or government can take away. We insist on personal responsibility, and we celebrate individual initiative. We're not entitled to success. We have to earn it. We honor the strivers, the dreamers, the risk takers, the entrepreneurs who have always been the driving force behind our free enterprise system, the greatest engine of growth and prosperity that the world's ever known. But we also believe in something called citizenship. Citizenship, a word at the very heart of our founding, a word at the very essence of our democracy. The idea that this country only works when we accept certain obligations to one another and to future generations. We believe that when a CEO pays his auto workers enough to buy the cars that they build, the whole company does better. We believe that when a family can no longer be tricked into signing a mortgage they can't afford, that family's protected, but so is the value of other people's homes. And so is the entire economy. We believe the little girl who's offered an escape from poverty by a great teacher or a grant for college could become the next Steve Jobs, or the scientist who cures cancer, or the President of the United States, and it is in our power to give her that chance. We know that churches and charities can often make more of a difference than a poverty program alone. We don't want handouts for people who refuse to help themselves, and we certainly don't want bailouts for banks that break the rules. We don't think the government can solve all of our problems, but we don't think that the government is the source of all of our problems, any more than our welfare recipients, or corporations, or unions, or immigrants, or gays, or any other group we're told to blame for our troubles. Because America, we understand that this democracy is ours. We, the people, recognize that we have responsibilities as well as rights, that our destinies are bound together, that a freedom which asks only what's in it for me, a freedom without a commitment to others, a freedom without love or charity or duty or patriotism is unworthy of our founding ideals and those who died in their defense. As citizens, we understand that America is not about what can be done for us, it's about what can be done by us, together, through the hard and frustrating but necessary work of self-government. That's what we believe. So you see, the election 4 years ago wasn't about me. It was about you. My fellow citizens, you were the change. You're the reason there's a little girl with a heart disorder in Phoenix who'll get the surgery she needs because an insurance company can't limit her coverage. You did that. You're the reason a young man in Colorado who never thought he'd be able to afford his dream of earning a medical degree is about to get that chance. You made that possible. You're the reason a young immigrant who grew up here and went to school here and pledged allegiance to our flag will no longer be deported from the only country she's ever called home. Why selfless soldiers won't be kicked out of the military because of who they are or who they love. Why thousands of families have finally been able to say to the loved ones who served us so bravely, welcome home. Welcome home. You did that. You did that. You did that. If you turn away now, if you buy into the cynicism that the change we fought for is impossible, well, change will not happen. If you give up on the idea that your voice can make a difference, then other voices will fill the void. The lobbyists and special interests, the people with the $10 million checks who are trying to buy this election, and those who are trying to make it harder for you to vote. Washington politicians who want to decide who you can marry or control health care choices that women should be making for themselves. Only you can make sure that doesn't happen. Only you have the power to move us forward. You know, I recognize that times have changed since I first spoke to this convention. Times have changed, and so have I. I'm no longer just a candidate. I'm the president. And that means I know what it means to send young Americans into battle. For I've held in my arms the mothers and fathers of those who didn't return. I've shared the pain of families who've lost their homes and the frustration of workers who've lost their jobs. If the critics are right that I've made all my decisions based on polls, then I must not be very good at reading them. And while I'm very proud of what we've achieved together, I'm far more mindful of my own failings, knowing exactly what Lincoln meant when he said, "I have been driven to my knees many times by the overwhelming conviction that I had no place else to go." But as I stand here tonight, I have never been more hopeful about America. Not because I think I have all the answers, not because I'm naive about the magnitude of our challenges. I'm hopeful because of you. The young woman I met at a science fair who won national recognition for her biology research while living with her family at a homeless shelter, she gives me hope. The auto worker who won the lottery after his plant almost closed but kept coming to work every day and bought flags for his whole town and one of the cars that he built to surprise his wife. He gives me hope. The family business in Warroad, Minnesota that didn't lay off a single one of their 4,000 employees when the recession hit, even when their competitors shut down dozens of plants, even when it meant the owner gave up some perks and some pay, because they understood that their biggest asset was the community and the workers who had helped build that business. They give me hope. I think about the young sailor I met at Walter Reed Hospital, still recovering from a grenade attack that would cause him to have his leg amputated above the knee. And 6 months ago, we would watch him walk into a White House dinner honoring those who served in Iraq. Tall and 20 pounds heavier, dashing in his uniform, with a big grin on his face, sturdy on his new leg. And I remember how a few months after that, I would watch him on a bicycle, racing with his fellow wounded warriors on a sparkling spring day, inspiring other heroes who had just begun the hard path he had traveled. He gives me hope. He gives me hope. I don't know what party these men and women belong to. I don't know if they'll vote for me. But I know that their spirit defines us. They remind me in the words of Scripture that ours is a future filled with hope. And if you share that faith with me, if you share that hope with me, I ask you tonight for your vote. If you reject the notion that this nation's promise is reserved for the few, your voice must be heard in this election. If you reject the notion that our government is forever beholden to the highest bidder, you need to stand up in this election. If you believe that new plants and factories can dot our landscape, that new energy can power our future, that new schools can provide ladders of opportunity to this nation of dreamers, if you believe in a country where everyone gets a fair shot and everyone does their fair share and everyone plays by the same rules, then I need you to vote this November. America, I never said this journey would be easy, and I won't promise that now. Yes, our path is harder, but it leads to a better place. Yes, our road is longer, but we travel it together. We don't turn back. We leave no one behind. We pull each other up. We draw strength from our victories, and we learn from our mistakes, but we keep our eyes fixed on that distant horizon, knowing that Providence is with us and that we are surely blessed to be citizens of the greatest nation on earth. Thank you. God bless you. And God bless these United States.
There was President Barack Obama asking voters to send him back for another term. We're very pleased to be joined with Nightline anchor Terry Moran. All right, Terry, what'd you think?
Well, it was, as they, for most of it, people like to say you campaign in poetry, govern in prose. I thought this is a speech you might give in Congress as a State of the Union. It was prosy. At the end, that was the old-time Obama religion, trying to lift people back to the hope that they felt. But a lot of it was really kind of a mishmash. It wasn't one of his best speeches, and it was startlingly negative for an incumbent president. I can't imagine an incumbent president who mocked his opponent, belittled him, demeaned the qualifications of the opponent with as much edge, maybe since Harry Truman, but it worked for Truman.
Can you imagine this speech, though, had it been given in the outdoor arena?
Would it have come across differently?
Like? Don't you think it could have been even flatter?
Yes, because for a lot, this crowd wanted to be lifted up. And the meandering part of the speech where he was out defending the record, outlining in very vague terms what the goals for the second term would be, he had people cheering here and there kind of desultorily. At the end, when he spoke of that hope, he brought them home.
There are no balloons in this auditorium, of course, but I felt like there was a balloon that was trying to lift this speech up. You get these sense of lift. Well, I want to disdain politics. I want to be above that process. I want to lift up the choice. I want to give you my big marching orders. But it was weighed down often at times, I thought, by the details of what he was getting into, the lack thereof sometimes. And I think he's still stuck in the essential conundrum of Barack Obama. He says we're the change they were waiting for. What is that change, and what ultimately are we in that? He's never answered that question, and I don't think this speech does it either.
Yeah, he answers it a little bit, I think, Rick, by appealing to something vague, but real, values. He says, our values as a party, my values as a person who grew up the way I did, they're middle-class values. I will stand with you. Well, what does that mean in terms of a plan? We don't have a great sense, but we do have a sense, or they do, that he's on their side, that he's for them.
One other note, the Obama and Biden families are on the stage right now embracing each other. This is a tiny brood compared to the enormous group of people who showed up in Tampa last week. They're still cleaning up Romney's and Ryan's from that stage. These are pretty small families, a diverse mix of people certainly, but nowhere near as many. Terry Moran, thank you for being here. You got a show to do.
I do.
Join him on Nightline right after we wrap up right here at the ABC News and Yahoo News live stream as the Obama and Bidens with lots of confetti guns here in the arena, creating that made-for-TV moment.
And as we broke here on our live stream with one of the folks who runs the convention, They said there was going to be some visual displays of celebration, and you see behind us fireworks going off on the screens behind us. So I think we thought, well, actually, that's what we got. We thought maybe there were going to be holograms. That never showed up.
Chris Moody from Yahoo News joins us here. And Chris, Barack Obama's given some tremendous speeches, some of the most famous presidential speeches and campaign speeches of our time. Where did this rank in the pantheon in your mind?
Well, I'd say 2004 is still the greatest speech he's ever given in the public sphere. I would want to say that people say these days that conventions are meaningless, that they don't have any purpose in the 21st century. After watching the past two conventions over 2 weeks, I would completely disagree. This gave both parties the opportunity to really show where they stand and put their flag in the ground and give the American people, as the president said tonight, a choice, and they made it very clear, I think.
All right. There are a lot of people out there weighing in, saying that this was actually Bill Clinton's convention, that he gave the most rousing speech, number one, but he also did a much better job of creating the rationale for a second term. What do you think about that?
Well, Bill Clinton really dove into the specifics yesterday. He took Mitt Romney's positions point by point by point, and wasn't scared to go off of his script as he did. I think anytime Bill Clinton is in a room, it's his party. It's hard to avoid that. But at the end of the day, Barack Obama is still the candidate.
This is a small item, but they're playing Brooks and Dunn, only in America. George W. Bush played that at all of his rallies in 2004. I'm a little surprised they didn't find a new piece of music. Country music, maybe they're going for a particular demographic with it. I was just surprised by this being the song that Americans are turning off President Obama for.
Well, I was thinking the same thing, because on the primary trail with all the Republican candidates, they all played Brooks and Dunn as well. I mean, this is the Republican song. You're exactly right.
So tell us, at the end of the day, the advisor said to us, here are the things that you should expect. Number one, this will not be a State of the Union speech. And number two, this is a speech that Americans are going to walk away from saying they know exactly what a second term is going to be.
I think he told the truth, and what he was saying is what you've had over the past 4 years, the policies that I have put forth and the policies that I have stood for are the ones I'm going to stand for over the next 4 years, and I'm going to continue this. And if you like what you saw, help me finish the project by electing me into a second term.
I think this is a speech. We heard Terry mention the mocking of Romney at times. He was playing up the power of the incumbency. The way that he used foreign policy in particular, saying my opponents are new when it comes to foreign policy, and almost a stand-up act type of mocking of them. But I feel like the speech was weighed down by that same incumbency, by the fact that he's been there for 4 years, that you can't just make promises and have expectations that stem from them, because you've been out there and been doing it for so long.
Well, hardly anyone has any more experience in foreign policy than someone who's been a president for even one term.
It's an unfair advantage, yes.
It certainly is. I'd say if we looked at President Obama 4 years ago, his foreign policy experience was a bit lacking, which some people say is why he chose Joe Biden to kind of fill the ticket.
But at the end of the day, this is a president who looks like what he's trying to do is set up a choice election, an election between two visions. And at the end of the day, though, voters don't vote on vision. They vote on performance, and that seems to me the thing that is going to be the toughest for him to defend, and it's why the speech, I think, did not carry that same oomph that we had maybe expected.
Well, he's still delivering the speech in a country that has an unemployment rate above 8%, and that hurts, and that's what you're probably going to see tomorrow with the jobs numbers when they come out, and I'm sure Republicans are going to try to make those jobs number announcements take over the boost he might have gotten from the speech tonight.
Chris, the marching orders that he delivered tonight, I'm asking you to rally around a set of goals for your country. That seemed more tailored for this room than the living rooms at home. You're being asked to march for a man that undecided voters aren't sold on yet. That, to me, seems a little bit tricky. Clearly, this room loves it. They're ready to march. But it's a little bit different when you're talking about people at home.
Well, even the people at home, he wants them to think that they are a part of something bigger than themselves. I think that's what 2008 was all about when he was campaigning for president for the first time. And that's a message that he wants to extend again and try to. I mean, we couldn't fit all the foot soldiers here in the room tonight. and I think he wants to bring in more.
We're seeing behind us Cardinal Timothy Dolan, who also delivered the benediction at the Republican convention last week, closing up this gathering. So kind of a quiet moment here. The music's gone down entirely, and everyone here is hushed after a pretty raucous convention. It's also striking to me that it took about 3 minutes for all of that noise to die down. It's kind of a somber and slower note to close this convention out.
Well, I recall at the Republican convention, the balloons were popping for at least 10 minutes or so, but then they did do the benediction, and people had to be very careful not to pop the balloons while they were praying, and they were standing with balloons up to their chests.
So the benefit of not having balloons, right?
There were designated balloon poppers on the floor that I saw 2 or 3 in the morning. They're still sitting there one at a time, pop, 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 as they break down these stages.
I wonder how
very
you
quickly.
prepared to be a professional balloon popper.
No doubt that there's training that's involved in it.
Sure.
All right, we're gonna wrap around to some Google Hangouts that we've had conducted from our studios in New York and Washington. A couple of people have been kind enough to stick with us all night and gather some friends and neighbors and acquaintances to tell us a little bit about how this speech and these proceedings have been received. We're going to start with a younger crowd. Tiffany Dina Lofton, who also joined us last week in Washington, D.C. And Tiffany, how was this received? Tell us briefly about what kind of folks were in your group and what were the takeaway messages?
Absolutely. We had folks from Oklahoma, California, and Michigan. It was really exciting because the students who were actually in my Google Hangout are actively registering other students across their campus to vote and in their states. Michigan has an awesome goal of 30,000 students, and California 40,000 students. And so they're actively talking to students about the issues that they really care about, things that I spoke to you all last week about, which is tuition increases, Pell Grants, making that mandatory funding, the Federal Dream Act, things like women's issues, LGBTQ issues, health issues, those type of things. And the students on my Google Hangout were really talking about when they graduate college, what are they going to be focusing on and what do they want to do when they graduate. They felt like tonight and this whole entire week, they've been hearing those issues brought up, and they've been hearing the concerns of different identities and diversity brought up in the conversation about us all being together in the next 4 years again. And they really enjoyed that, and it was really awesome. One of my students wants to be a doctor, another student wants to be a campaign organizer, which is really awesome. And they talked a lot about the different tones that the RNC last week and the DNC this week kind of set for students. And at the end of the day, you know, Barack Obama's done a lot of grassroots fundraising. Mitt Romney's done a lot of fundraising. And students have some really interesting concerns in my Google Hangout, which was recorded. And so it's really awesome to go and check that out.
All right, so thank you so much to Tiffany for organizing that. We're going to get a little bit of a parenting perspective now from Catherine Connors from Babbel.com. Catherine, what did moms and dads out there hear in this speech tonight?
Well, we had a really interesting discussion about really the tone of the speech and the message of the speech. I mean, right off the bat, you know, we honed in on President Obama's message around this really being a choice proposition, that there being 2 different paths, 2 different visions, you know, and as much as we had, you know, a couple of like left-leaning, you know, liberal parents and one very conservative, libertarian-leaning dad, you know, and we were all in somewhat of an agreement that it's, you know, that it's interesting. It's obviously politically expedient to frame things as a choice proposition, that there's 2 paths and we have to choose between these 2 very different serious paths. You know, we all wondered and talked quite a bit about, is there any common ground? Like, as we move forward into the process of the campaign and really start considering what the 2 different parties are bringing to the table, how do we figure out what the possibilities are for collaboration going forward? We talked a lot about how a lot of the obstacles over the last 4 years seem to have been about heads almost literally butting. You know, we wondered, as we consider these 2 different paths, if the paths are so different, how are we going to get to common ground eventually? Obviously, to make a choice, you know, we want things framed in terms of paths and vision, but we also want to know, how do we get to playing together nicely in the sandbox?
So the key question, of course, did anyone change their mind? Did you get any switchers because of this?
You know, I don't think we got switchers, but we certainly came to the end of the conversation, you know, sort of marveling at how, you know, how much common ground we actually had. I mean, between our, you know, far left and self-described post-evangelical liberal, you know, and our libertarian, you know, they both agreed that they had the same concerns. You know, it was a question of how you get to addressing those concerns. And they both spoke about, you know, what they would want to hear, you know, from a great candidate, Obama or otherwise, you know, and talked about, you know, what would need to be at stake, or what would need to be on the table for them to potentially switch their support. So I don't think any minds were changed tonight, but we certainly found a lot of common ground in the questions we were asking and the potential solutions that we were hoping to hear considered.
Thank you very much for that. And we're going to now turn to the Reverend Jennifer Lindman, who's going to give us her faith-based Google Hangout. Jennifer, can you give us your take from your Hangout today?
Sure. Well, we were a pretty diverse group. We were all fairly young, but we were a Sikh, a Muslim, a Jew, an evangelical Christian, a Roman Catholic, and a Hindu, and myself. I'm an Episcopal priest. And so it was really interesting to hear sort of a lot of commonalities and traditions. People were very concerned about care for the poor. There was a common thread in all of our traditions for kind of caring for your neighbor. Other things that came up were the tone of the entire election, not necessarily the speech per se. Concerns about people lying and not truth-telling, concerns about demeaning and demonizing opponents. There was a sense among us that the world would be a better place if we were able to treat each other as children of God, or depending on the language you use from the different traditions. I also personally found it really interesting. Often faith-based things in the United States are kind of broken down into mostly Christian, and maybe you have a Jewish perspective. But this group, because we were more diverse, got to hear from, get to hear Muslims speaking for themselves.
All right, thank you so much, Reverend Jennifer Lindman. And finally, we're going to turn to Christina Constantini of Univision. So for the Latino perspective, did any minds changed as a result of this speech, and what were the themes that you took away from your group?
I don't know if there were any minds changed, but immigration, as always, is a very emotional issue for the Latino community, and it continues to be one, especially in this election. 9 out of 10 Latinos support the DREAM Act, and we had a very diverse group of people who joined us. We had conservatives, liberals, conservatives turned liberals, a dreamer, and a media expert, somebody who's been in media for a while. And for all of them, immigration is really the thing to watch. When you poll Latinos, they always say that, the economy, jobs are important to them. But when it comes to emotion, immigration seems to be what we always talk about. And so, once again, the dreamer that joined us said that it was great that he mentioned dreamers, but really, he set the records for deportations. Deferred action is great and is helping some people, but it's a temporary measure. They're also looking for more of an answer on that. On immigration, the Democrats definitely have a much more sympathetic platform than Republicans. So immigration is the big theme for the night, but thanks.
All right, Christina Constantini from Univision, thank you so much. We're going to go down now to the floor, kind of a hushed floor, strangely enough. Jake Tapper, our chief White House correspondent, joins us. Jake, your takeaways from this speech.
It was an interesting speech. I've been covering President Obama since 2006, so I admittedly hear his speeches, watch his speeches with a different eye and ear than a lot of others, just because I've heard him speak so much. It almost was 3 or 4 different speeches cobbled together. The first section, very similar to his campaign pitch on the road. And actually, I was just talking with Mary Bruce, our producer. We've heard him do that part of the speech, the choice that Americans face when they go to the voting booths. We've heard him do that better on the road. It was certainly fine. Then there was the commander-in-chief card that he played, and unafraid to play it, talking about going after Romney's foreign policy views, going after foreign policy blunders that Obama said, depicted as blunders, especially Romney in London during the Olympics. There were some zingers against Mitt Romney that he didn't identify him by name. He called him my opponent, but that I didn't necessarily expect it. And then there was the last section, about a quarter to a third of the speech, that was what we're more used to, the soaring rhetoric, the poetry, the oratory in which he was calling for the nation to come together and calling for people to support him. It almost was very different speeches. I heard Matt Dowd speaking earlier about wondering how much the speech was written for specific groups in specific states. We all know this election is very, very close. It's coming down to a small percentage of undecided voters in like 6 battleground states: Virginia, Ohio, Iowa, Colorado, etc. And I do wonder how much of this was written right for specific neighborhoods in mind. But obviously, the 20,000 people in this arena loved the speech, were very enthusiastic about it, especially the end. So those are my basic thoughts. Now, of course, the tough work of the campaign really kicks in post-Labor Day. President Obama goes on the road tomorrow to New Hampshire, to Iowa, to Florida, all in one day, and we'll be there with him.
All right, Jake Tapper, thanks so much. Keeping us honest here, and I know you'll be with the president as he's traveling to those battleground states in these next couple of days and watching where we go.
ABC's Matthew Dowd. Matthew, we've heard some tremendous Obama speeches over the years. Where does this rank?
Well, I think he's done 2 speeches primarily that I've heard over the time, especially political. There's this sort of Obama "I have a dream" speech, this great audacity, great things, moonshots, here's what we want to do. And then there is the really take it out on the other side of the woodshed. It's neither one of those speeches. I was actually struck by the fact that it was a very modest speech in many ways. He could have picked a lot of meat to throw into this crowd to generate a whole bunch of screaming and excitement, and it was, to my mind, purposeful that they didn't. All those moments that he could have gotten and said some things that would have got the crowd to their feet screaming, he chose to pull it out. And in my mind, more than any other speaker at this entire 3 days convention, he was talking directly to that undecided voter in Ohio, in Virginia, in Florida. He, the president, was speaking to them more than anybody else.
More than Bill Clinton did.
More than Bill Clinton, because Bill Clinton still had a series of things in there, jokes about the other side, things like that. And the other thing that I'm struck by is that the president, it came the closest I've ever seen him come to actually saying that maybe he didn't have all the answers, that he made some mistakes, that the fact that he said he's changed was actually a give to the other side, saying, yes, didn't do it all right, even though he didn't say this, and maybe now you can start listening to me, and maybe you can open your ears to me.
We heard from his advisors before the speech that he was going to get into some real specifics. He was really going to lay that path out for what a second term would look like. Did you get that from this? Okay.
No, I didn't get that from this speech. I gave it. He leaned into a few things. I think, as what I just said, I think the tone was right. I think the audience that he was thinking about was right. I am not convinced that he gave the confidence to those voters that think the country's on the wrong track to stick with him, and that he had this firm vision, compelling vision that they knew how to get to the promised land. I don't think this speech gave them that confidence they need.
Well, and it seems too that when 80% of Americans say their #1 issue is jobs in the economy, we didn't really hear a lot of specifics on jobs in the economy, right? Here's my economic plan. Here's how we're going to get people back to work. Here is how you're going to go from being in an unemployment line into, an office. We heard a lot about all kinds of concepts, but nothing like that.
And that's the problem, I think. The problem is, for those people that are undecided, that like him, but think the country's on the wrong track and are dating Romney off and on in the course of this, need a sense of confidence and trust that he has that plan and knows where to take him, even though they think he might not have done the best job over the last 4 years. And as I said, I think he still has to cross that bridge sometime in the next 60 days.
ABC's Matt Dowd now without that great tie he had earlier. As the night goes on, we're all getting a little tired, losing articles of clothing occasionally. Matt, thanks for being here all of these last 2 weeks. John Karl joins us down, our chief political correspondent, down on the floor of the hall. Clearly they loved it where you were sitting. What did you hear in this speech?
Well, one line that he said that stood out to me was he said, times have changed, and so have I. I mean, he comes, as he said, not as a candidate anymore, but as the president. He comes not promising just hope and change, but defending a record, defending an economic record that is going to be savagely attacked because we have 8% unemployment, higher because most of the country thinks that the country is moving in the wrong direction, and different because the Barack Obama of 2008 was something of a post-partisan figure, or at least packaged that way. Somebody who appealed to independents and a lot of even Republicans. You don't find a lot of Obama Republicans anymore, and that speech was a tough speech. There were sections of that speech that were very tough, very different tone than what we heard in 2008. I mean, Rick, he even attacked Mitt Romney for the trip to London to the Olympics. You know, when Romney had that, when he criticized or raised questions about whether or not the London was ready, and they insulted an ally. I thought that was a pretty extraordinary attack line that you're accustomed to hearing, from surrogates that are out there, but not necessarily in a big moment convention speech like this. But of course, he came back at the end. I mean, that whole wind-up at the end was, could have been right out of the 2008 campaign.
All right, so John, you've been on the floor watching both the Democrat and Republican nominee give their speeches. What does this tell us about the kind of campaign rhetoric we should expect to see for the next 60 days out on the campaign trail?
Well, a couple of things. One is just the obvious here, and it's hard to say how it's going to translate on the campaign trail, but the atmosphere in these two conventions is entirely different. This convention, much more energy on the floor. I mean, these delegates are at the edge of their seats for a lot of these speeches. The decibel level, I mean, it was so much louder here, so much more energy than what we saw in Tampa. And, a lot more here kind of true believers with faith in President Obama, whereas what was the driving message in Tampa was not so much people that would do anything for Mitt Romney, but people that would do anything to stop Barack Obama. Very, very different tone. Coming out of it, the focus in Tampa was relentlessly on the economy. Here, certainly an economic focus, but a lot of talk about social issues, a lot of talk about abortion and women's rights, and a lot of talk about foreign policy, which we heard almost none of in Tampa. I mean, the big chunk of this speech was on foreign policy. He portrayed Romney and Ryan as newcomers to foreign policy, to this whole business. Which, by the way, isn't really incorrect.
It isn't incorrect, but of course it could have described that candidate Obama 4 years ago, or almost anyone who runs for the office, unless you've already been a vice president or something of the like. John Karl, thank you for being here. Thank you for being with us and bringing us some great guests there on the floor these last couple weeks. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, I can't believe this is actually coming to an end, Rick.
Yeah.
Can you believe that I do. I feel a little
tear. James Taylor's gone. We don't have anything.
There's nobody left except for you all that I want to thank. Thank all of you for tuning in for these last 2 weeks and watching us as we brought you these conventions. We brought you the stories. We brought you the guests. We made a little bit of news here and there. We had a ton of fun. We hope you did too. And we want to send you out, first of all, looking at some of our favorite doodles. Remember, we asked people when they came in. And look who we have here. Cal Penn with the little, I don't know what that is.
Dude, where's my car? I don't know. I don't know
what that is. My favorite really is Reggie Love trying to draw the state of North Carolina.
And make it blue,
he is a Duke Blue Devil.
Right.
As well.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz went for the hashtag. You got to respect that. Now this one, Congressman Hoyer, that's a great looking signature, and that's maybe a passable Maryland. I'm not sure.
It could also be seen as New York. But
Ashley Judd gave us a heart, or no, gave Barack Obama a heart. I thought she loved.
I thought it was for me.
But now Governor Hickenlooper, now that was actually a beer, because you talked all about craft beer. So that I think that was a winner. Ben LeBolt drew the Obama logo. I didn't notice that earlier.
That's pretty good. And
I thought it was a sad face.
And Guy Cecil from the DSCC managed to find it green.
We
didn't even know
he found a button we didn't know existed on the iPad. But it was a lot of fun. We did it for both conventions, of course. Now that is a Maryland.
You
gotta love that.
Wow. that has to be that's Governor O'Malley.
It is.
Wow.
That's a lot of experience there. Chris Redfern with an Ohio that I don't know if that quite cuts it.
No.
John Oliver from the Daily Show, loving democracy even as he mocks it relentlessly throughout his time here. But we did it for both conventions. We did I lost count of the hours, Amy, long ago.
I did too. I don't even know what day it is, where we are.
It's Thursday. We're in Charlotte. I can tell you we are going to say goodbye, though, very sadly. This has been a terrific 2 weeks for everyone here in Charlotte, for everyone back in New York and in Washington who've helped out with this broadcast. Our great partners at Univision, at Yahoo News, our friends at ABC, some of the best in the business, including personal friends of mine, Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts, some of the legends of the business, Diane Sawyer, George Stephanopoulos, the list goes on and on. We've had some great bookings, some great guests, some great times. It's been a lot of fun, Amy.
It has been a lot of fun. So we're going to say goodbye. This is the long goodbye.
The long goodbye.
The long goodbye. But, you know, you can always follow us on Twitter, at Amy E. Walter, at Rick Klein. We got 60 days left, everybody. We're going to be tweeting and writing and covering every single minute of it.
And we'll leave you with some of the sights and sounds from the last day of the last of the political conventions. Thank you so much for watching.
Can't you see the sunshine? I say, can't you just feel the moonshine? Guess I'm going to Carolina, get my mind.
Too many people struggled, suffered, and died to make it possible for every American to exercise their right to vote. We must march to the polls like never, ever before.
All across America, autos are back. Manufacturing is rebounding. Why? USA!
It's my great honor to place into nomination for the office of Vice President of the United States, my father, my hero, Joe Biden.
Please welcome former Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords.
To the flag of the United States of America, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Today's servicemen and women have been called the next great generation, and they live up to that calling in everything they do. And so for them, and what they represent, please stand with me in saying thank you.
So let me say to the young and the young at heart, Barack Obama is only president because you worked for him, because you believed in him. He has the quality my father most admired in public life, courage.
It took President Obama, against the advice of many, to give that order and finally rid this earth of Osama bin Laden. Because of all the actions he took, because of the calls he made, because of the determination of American workers and the unparalleled bravery of our special forces, we can now proudly say what you've heard me say the last 6 months. Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. So I say to you tonight, with absolute confidence, America's best days are ahead, and yes, we are on our way. Re-elect President Barack Obama.
Know this, America. Our problems can be solved. Our challenges can be met. The path we offer may be harder, but it leads to a better place, and I'm asking you to choose that future. I never said this journey would be easy, and I won't promise that now. Yes, our path is harder, but it leads to a better place. Yes, our road is longer, but we travel it together. We don't turn back. We leave no one behind. We pull each other up. We draw strength from our victories, and we learn from our mistakes, but we keep our eyes fixed on that distant horizon, knowing that Providence is with us and that we are surely blessed to be citizens of the greatest nation on earth.